Hi, everyone. I'm John Timpane of the hardly famous musical Innertube podcast.
And I'm Don Rooney of that very same audio program.
And we're here to make a major announcement.
Let's see, it goes general confusion, major announcement, Colonel O'Corn, corporal punishment,
and private parts. But seriously, the musical Innertube has a shiny new website we'd like you to check out.
That's right. Just log on to musicalinnertube.com and you'll find every single episode of the Musical Innertube, complete with episode notes and guest profiles.
Plus, there's lots of extras. You can subscribe to the podcast, read our blog, leave us a review, even leave a voicemail.
And you'll find a special section that tells you all about the history of the Musical Innertube and a little bit about John and me.
So, why don't you log on right now to musicalinnertube.com and join in on all the fun.
Don't use if you're allergic to the Musical Innertube. May cause warm feelings or swelling of the toes. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Musical Innertube. I'm Don Rooney.
And I'm John Timpane. You know, Don's had quite a career in radio and television, where he's been an air personality, a news anchor, even a TV weatherman.
And John has been a college professor. He's written several books, and he's been an editor and features writer at the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper.
We first teamed up for a radio show in college. On one show, we introduced a soothing musical interlude.
But we stumbled, and it came out Musical Innertube.
And that became the name for this podcast, where we talk with interesting people about their interesting lives, difference makers who really make a difference.
And today on the Musical Innertube, we're talking to Garry Gilliam, who has quite a past. He was born and raised here in Harrisburg until about the age of 8, and then he was sent off to the Milton Hershey School. Now, Milton Hershey School was indeed founded by the guy who made the chocolate bar. And originally he put it together for orphan children, but by the time Garry went there, it was a boarding school for children who were living below the poverty line. But he did well there. He graduated. He went to Penn State University. He had kind of a checkered football career there, but he picked up 3 degrees while he was at Penn State. After he left Penn State, he signed on as a free agent to the Seattle Seahawks. He went to the Super Bowl with the Seahawks. They lost, unfortunately, but he had that experience. Had a couple of years with the 49ers. And then when his football career ended, Garry founded The Bridge. Garry, welcome to the Musical Innertube.
Thanks for having me. That was a great introduction.
Tell me a little bit about The Bridge. What is The Bridge?
Yeah, so The Bridge is actually a for-purpose real estate development company that works with a nonprofit as well as a consulting company to bring together a system that we call systemic empowerment. So what we do is we acquire properties like schools, malls, warehouses, shopping centers, and we convert those into what we call eco-villages that have spaces for the community to work, eat, live, learn, and play. And then our nonprofit teaches the community how to utilize those spaces. So we're removing blight. We're making them more sustainable. Essentially, we're looking for these buildings that have good bones, but just need new nervous systems, right? And we're using the community to figure out exactly what should be done within these spaces. Because oftentimes a school or a mall is centrally located, and especially if it's been abandoned or nothing's being done with it, we can provide, a good catalyst for economic restoration. So that's the model of The Bridge.
The first thing that you've undertaken as part of The Bridge, the first building that you've tackled, again, is a Harrisburg institution. Again, for people who don't know about Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Bishop McDevitt was a Catholic school that existed on Market Street, not far, just up from downtown Harrisburg for years and years and years. And then they moved out and found a bigger location for which to expand. And Garry, you've taken over that old building. What are some of the things that you've done with that building so far?
Yeah, well, so far we've acquired the building. We've got it rezoned from institutional to commercial neighborhood, which allows us to do our mixed-use development that we're planning, which is an eco-village. Let's see, we've secured a few grants, and we're working on finalizing our permitting and bidding process for phase 1, which is the complete renovation of the gym into an event space, we'll call it. And then also the full stabilization of the building. So a new HVAC system, plumbing, electric, all the like. So that's what we've done so far.
And you've done something interesting with the old football field that used to be in the back of the school. What did you do with that?
Yes. So from footballs to fruits and vegetables. Now we've actually converted the football field, part of the football field, into a community garden. And what we did was we sought out the wooden bleachers from the stands, and we used those to create the boxes down in the field. And then we also took a few of those bleachers and put them back up into the hill because, as described, the school itself was actually dug into a hill. So the football field itself is dug into a hill really too. And as well as the bleachers. So there's ground under there. So when we put the bleachers back in, kind of imagine like, Machu Picchu, if you will. And we're growing vegetables in there. We're collecting water off of our building, off of the concession stand. We've got a bunch of community organizations that have joined in to assist us in the construction of these boxes and the maintenance of the garden. And we actually locked in Giant as a naming sponsor. So it's actually called the Giant Bleacher Garden at the Bridge. So, yeah.
Giant is one of the local supermarkets around here. So this is what you're talking about when you talk about an eco-village?
Exactly. An eco-village is really kind of a city within a city. It's supposed to be a self-sustaining, closed-looped neighborhood, if you will.
What are the plans going forward? Then you're going to renovate the building. You said you're going to make a community space in there. What else are you going to do with the old school building?
Yep. So there's 5 branches to the bridge: work, eat, live, learn, and play. We call it our play well, right? Work, eat, live, learn, play well, play well. And within those 5 different spaces, right, in the workspace, that's for our entrepreneurs. So those are co-working spaces, office spaces, maker spaces, right? So think 3D printers and offices for people to come together and create businesses together. That's the work branch. The eat branch, that's as we mentioned, right, some farming going on site. That's also restaurants, retail spaces. And the way that we do most of our farming will actually be by way of aeroponics and hydroponics. So that's actually growing food without soil in a completely sustainable way, right? So again, we'll be doing water collection. The pumps and the lights we use are powered by solar panels. We'll be doing geothermal, which means pulling air from under the ground, which is actually at a consistent 53.5 degrees. So when we're trying to grow food in the wintertime, it's a lot easier to heat our greenhouse up that's at a steady 53 to get it up to 70 or 80 as opposed to -5. So that, as well as a bio-waste food digester that allows us to bring in fresh food waste, convert that into nutrients, capture the methane from that process to continue to power our heats and our pumps, right? So really closing the water loop, the waste loop, the energy loop, and really the way we should all be farming and should have been for the last 10,000 years. But I digress. So that's the eat branch. And then the live branch, that's housing, right? So that's actually low income housing. That's veteran housing, that's senior housing, and market rate housing. So that's housing actually for everyone, a true village. That's the live branch. Learn is actually our nonprofit, which teaches people how to use the spaces that we've created. Right. It's not just enough to build this big, beautiful, sustainable building in a community if that community doesn't know how to use the maker space or know how to farm. Right. So what the nonprofit does is partner with local educational institutions as well as community organizations. And we provide what we call our self-sufficiency programs, teaching people how to start businesses, teaching people how to farm, teaching people how to invest in real estate, teaching people about trades. Right. So all those things go on within the learn branch. And then our play branch is providing entertainment options for people. So an event space, right, certainly for concerts, for TED Talks, for seminars and lectures. That's electric go-karts, trampolines, batting cages, rock climbing walls. Again, so that's everything really, like I said, a kind of a small city within a city. And we take these old schools, malls, shopping centers, right, which are readily available since the demise of retail through the pandemic. And we convert them into these now, again, holistic, self-contained, self-sustaining eco-villages, right? That again has everything you really need right in that spot. And the idea is if you take the model of the bridge and you toss it in the middle of a desert, a city should start to populate around it, right? So that's the idea. And we call that systemic empowerment. Right, you can't help but be empowered by being within, that community.
I'm interested, Garry. Can you talk about the origins of your expertise and interest in doing things like this, like taking over derelict buildings and turning them into eco villages. Can you talk about how this began for you?
Yeah. So the model itself actually came from lived experience, right? So I grew up at Milton Hershey School, and beyond the phenomenal school that he founded and the chocolate company, the town of Hershey is also set up in a phenomenal way, right? Milton Hershey didn't just create this chocolate factory, a place to work, but he also created this ecosystem for his workers to really thrive. So he created other places to eat, live, learn, and play, right? So Hershey Gardens, he built homes, Hershey Park, Milton Hershey School, Penn State Hershey Medical Center, right, is there now. And what that has yielded to this day are some of the highest property values in the state, some of the lower cancer rates in the state, one of the highest graduation rates of a local public high school in the state. This is an international destination, a worldwide known brand, all off the back of a Fortune 100 company. And then here's the kicker, right? Milton Hershey School actually has, so the philanthropic arm of the companies goes to Milton Hershey School, and it has the largest educational endowment in the world. This is beyond Harvard, beyond Yale, is Milton Hershey School, right? So when we're talking about people, planet, profit, philanthropy, true perpetuity and a legacy, right? Milton Hershey, his wife, the company, right? They laid the blueprint over 100 years ago. So that's what I was raised in. That's what I grew up seeing, that environment, that culture, that type of process, and I was always curious while at the school where the rest of the campus is at. And then moreover, where are the other towns like Hershey, right? Like where's Coca-Cola's town? Where's McDonald's town? Where's Elon's town? Where's Jeff Bezos' town, right? Because Milton Hershey was alive during the time of the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers, and he took his extreme fortune and invested it into the lives of those that were marginalized, right? And focused on education. And I'm a product of that. So with that being said, identifying points of pain, within our society, seeing that there's lots of abandoned buildings around, and realizing that real estate is a great way to bring people together as well as convert those buildings into true economic restoration. Then it was about finding the team that could do it. So it was really about an idea that came out, contrived out. So I mentioned it, I kind of glazed over, so I'll lean in a little heavier into it. At Penn State, I triple majored in business, advertising, and psychology. And in our business school, they taught us to identify a point of pain and to solve it with a product, a good, or a service. Right. So that's what I did while going through Penn State as well as my professional football career. But some of the points of pain that I identified were things like homelessness and food insecurity, right, and the disparity and the gaps within education, right? Things like that. Those were some of the things that I had wrote up solutions for. Again, most of them inspired by the environment that I was raised in. And then it was about executing. And so one of my former teammates, Marshawn Lynch, he wasn't a big fan of talking to the media. And he always said, I'm about that action. Right. So, same thing, like, I'm not here to talk about it. Let's just get to doing it. So then it was about taking the idea and bringing it to fruition. So finding the architects, the engineers, the general contractors, the grant writers, right? People who have done things like this before, bringing them all together, sharing the vision, and then, really going about the process of executing. So I guess to answer your question, lived experience. And then I guess beyond that, in terms of like the actual sustainability of it, growing up, I actually always wanted to be either a video game designer or an astronaut. And I got too big. I got too big to be an astronaut, but it gave me this, I guess, global holistic view of Earth's systems and how they're all connected, right? With the rain and the carbon and all the different cycles we have, and all of them really work together to keep Earth alive, if you will. And I always saw our bodies as a very similar thing. So just kind of like a high level thought process, realizing that it's important for us to mimic nature, right? Biomimicry. So to me, that means longevity. So that's in the bridge. When we say sustainability, it's really about longevity, right? Earth's been here for a while. So if we can replicate Earth systems and the processes of water collection and collecting some of the sun, right? Those things which are incorporated into our sustainability plan, that's really, in all honesty, where it comes from. It's from me wanting to be an astronaut and one day going to another planet, and also realizing that if you're going to build on another planet, you need to have closed loop, self-sustaining eco-villages there, right? So let's perfect it here. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's kind of my contribution still to our space travel. So, hey, Elon and Jeff, if you want to talk about it, holla at me.
There's an open invitation. I was going to ask, though, you can't do it single-handedly. What kind of people do you have on board helping you put this dream into a reality?
I'll explain in football terms, right? If I guess I wear two hats. I'm the head coach as well as the quarterback, which I guess never has happened in the NFL, but in this case it is. But I can't be successful as a quarterback without a great offensive line, right? Very experienced. They can alert me to anything coming that I'm not, expecting. Hey, there's a blitz corner coming. You might want to slide protection that way. I've got great receivers, running backs. I've got a great defense, great coaches, advisors, right? And with that said, they're, again, architects, engineers, sustainability consultants, branding consultants, my legal counsel, my board, on all of our different entities, right? We all work together and communicate quite often to make sure all this moves forward. It's not just me by any means. The idea certainly did come, again, like I said, from lived experience, but it was a lived experience of a lot of different people too, because the founders of the bridge are also all from Milton Hershey School. So we all work together to bring that model to fruition, and again, find the experts that could do it. So without naming them, all individually, there is a sizable team that's moving the bridge forward.
Why do you think corporations haven't done in the past what Milton Hershey did?
What I've come to the conclusion of, because I am a global speaker and I get to talk to some of these individuals who do run some of these larger companies, and what I've realized is it's not that they don't want to, but it's because they haven't met people like me or my team or people that are doing things like this that offer them an opportunity and a model and a blueprint on how to really do this, and not just in a philanthropic way or not just in a profitable way, but really bringing those two things together and what we call a missing middle. So I guess to answer your question, yeah, they just haven't met people like me or my team. And when they do, they're very willing to get involved, whether that's through the nonprofit side or through the for-profit side with naming rights, or even looking to replicate a few different models, within the communities that they're most heavy in, so I guess that's the answer. They just haven't heard about it yet.
I think that's a very potent concept that you brought up here, which is the missing middle, where we have no lack of great ideas, but then to reach out and actually connect with the people that can make the ideas happen, that often just never gets off the ground. That's the part that's the hard part, right? The missing middle. So I wonder how you, is it that you go around and talk to people? Does your team go around and make presentations? Can you talk about filling up that middle?
Yeah, well, high level, how do we get over a missing middle? Well, we build a bridge, right? So it's actually at the core of everything that we do. We work with the community, one, in identifying the true disparities. And what I mean by that are these quote unquote gaps, whether it's between this neighborhood or that neighborhood, this person or that person. We're trying to figure out where the gaps are within the corporate workplace, right? Our disposable income and our density, where, in terms of health and wellness, we heard a lot about these pre-existing health conditions and obesity and overweight levels, right? Where there are differences from this neighborhood to that neighborhood, right? What contributes to that? So what we do is we identify not just the disparities, but also the root cause of those things. And then we look to really stitch them up, which is a lot, right? So it's a true public-private partnership. So that's working with local community organizations, right? Nonprofits that a lot of them already have this information and are doing the work within their individual sector or silo. So our objective on the nonprofit side is to identify those corporations and individuals and bring them together so that they can learn. I'm not going to say learn, but I guess figure out ways to work together in a more efficient manner. Apply for grants, market things together, have shared resources. That's really the objective, on the nonprofit side. And by doing so, by gathering the information, understanding where the biggest disparities are, that allows us then to approach our elected officials, who are the ones who, control some of the purse strings for different grants, and tax credits. So as long as you've got the numbers, you've got programs and plans, and you can, apply for different grants, then it's up to that public-private partnership to truly execute on that plan. Right, having the faith of the elected officials to give the grant to some of those, I'll call them last mile organizations, right? Beyond the American Red Crosses, beyond some of those bigger ones, some of the ones that are kind of boots on the ground locally, getting them the funds, maximizing their capacity, and allowing that work to be done by some of the people who are from these communities. So that's how we go about doing it. So before we ever even put out an actual real estate development plan, we've already held a handful of community meetings, asking the community, hey, here's a building. What would you do to impact 250,000 lives within this building? How would you do it? Right. So then we take that information to our architects, our engineers, and most of the time it does fit within one of our branches, right? Work, eat, live, learn, or play. And then we move forward, right? So getting all the information from the community, once we then go into our actual development process and we talk to city council again about rezoning, permitting, bidding, we've got the support of the residents, right? So normally those things are expedited because it's a little bit different than your traditional developer, who does all that without the input of the community. And then the first time they hear about it is at, a city council meeting where they're voting, yay, nay. And normally those types of things don't go over well. So, just a kind of a different approach to development.
Yes.
And I guess what I would say is when we talk about inclusion, here at the Bridge, that it's true. And that means don't talk about me without me. Right? How can you possibly provide a solution for an individual if they're not at the table telling you exactly what it is that they're going through, right? So we can work together to provide, again, those solutions. Again, that's how you get over a missing middle, is by bringing everybody to the table.
Let me ask you, there are a lot of people that would like to do the kind of things or have started to do the kind of things that you're doing, and they've run into roadblocks. What are some of the roadblocks or monkey wrenches that you've run into that you have to work around in order to make this successful?
I mean, I think that's with anything, really. I call that the valley of despair. And any entrepreneur, anybody who's trying to do anything is gonna hit that valley of despair. And it's really at that moment, right? If you can get through it, really control what you can control, which is things my football coaches always said, one day at a time, one play at a time, right? Those are the things that really get you through that valley of despair. Because if you get discouraged or you hop on the next shiny object, right, then you're just going to go back into the cycle of extreme optimism and then approaching that valley of despair again, get discouraged and go start a new thing, right? So with that said, specifically, the building in Harrisburg we bought in November of 2019, right? And then COVID happened a few months later. So if you want to talk about monkey wrenches, that's a big one. And it slowed down a lot of things, I won't lie, but it also sped up some others, right? It really magnified the disparities that we provided solutions for and opened up a bunch of different funding sources on the public side, right? Different grants and tax credits, right? Cities and municipalities and school districts, getting injections of funds from the American Rescue Plan, right? So that means properties are available, funds and grants are available to develop them, so it actually did help in terms of our expansion and also, just a development here in Harrisburg too, with some of the funds that became available. But besides that, anything that you would, I guess, expect with, a global pandemic, our economic system failing, a racial civil war that was apparently about to approach, just like some really crazy things going on. But, we just continue to churn and chuck, and everybody in the team knows, I oftentimes tell them, no pressure, no diamonds, right? So let's take the pressure and focus it. Water is mist until you focus it and it can cut a diamond, right? So let's stay focused and do what we got to do to keep pushing forward. People need help yesterday, and people will realize that this arc we've built is the exact arc that's needed in boat to get out of this pandemic, this flood, right? And how we can move forward, because we can't go back to normal because normal was the problem.
We'll return to our talk with Garry in just a moment, but first, this soothing musical Innertube.
Garry's Bridge Foundation and Giant Supermarkets are turning the bleachers of an old football field in the city of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, into a place that will help feed families with nutritious foods that are grown locally.
Volunteers are working the new terraced gardens in those former bleachers to grow lettuce, carrots, cucumbers, tomatoes, squash, eggplant, pumpkins, green beans, zucchinis, and herbs. A group called Planet Bee also donated beehives to help with pollination and produce honey.
To see pictures of the garden and donate to keep it running, log on to pledgeit.org/the-bleacher-garden.
And now back to the musical Innertube.
You grew up in Harrisburg, or you spent the first 8 years of your life here, and your mother and yourself and your family lived in poverty. And that's what you're facing now as you're trying to rebuild McDevitt into something that I'm assuming people who came from, who are living in the kind of background you came from would take advantage of. So how much is that driving you, that experience that you had as a child that you would like to see not repeated?
I call that, new term here, I call that generational actualization. And I'll lean it back to Milton Hershey School and this whole man concept that they oftentimes talked about. And the fourth aspect of it was community engagement, community give back, right? It wasn't enough to get through a problem or something, but can you figure it out and bring it back, to your community? So again, one of my degrees is in psychology. And not that you need a degree in psychology to understand or have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So essentially what it is a pyramid that you take care of people's basic needs first, and that allows them to kind of work up through this pyramid to eventually reach self-actualization, right? So at the bottom, you've got your physiological needs. So your food, shelter, water. You've got to take care of things like that to then take care of safety and security, right? Make people have, homes and they feel safe within their environments. Above that is love and belonging. Above that is self-esteem. Above that is self-actualization. And that's the model, right? And self-actualization is, we'll call it the desire to become the most that you can be. And going and studying that and kind of observing myself and observing those around me, I always felt like self-actualization wasn't the top of the pyramid, or even that it should be a pyramid at all, but more maybe concentric circles. And I do believe that there's things beyond just a bunch of self-interest. So I created a new model and I added 2 more tiers on top of, or in my model within the model. So above self-actualization, again, which is the desire to become the most that one can be, I do believe that above that is community actualization, which is the desire to help others become the most that they can be. And then above and beyond that is generational actualization, which is the desire to preserve our planet as well as pass on our teachings, right? So as much as you'd love to go back into a community and talk about sustainability, right, that's kind of a generational actualization, right? I'm worried about paying my bills. I'm worried about eating food, right? So we can't really tap into the inner parts or the tops of this pyramid without taking care of people's basic needs. So I'll say this, that I understand that one, talent is evenly distributed and resources and opportunity are not, right? And I saw that as an example at Milton Hershey School because we actually have a higher graduation rate than the local public high school in Hershey. And most of the kids at Milton Hershey School, a lot of them come from Harrisburg, Philly, Pittsburgh, these inner cities that have much worse graduation rates. So when you provide the resources, the opportunities, the environments, the culture, the traditions, right, that yield empowerment, then that's exactly what you see in future generations. So again, generational actualization, to your point, I don't think that kids necessarily need to go to Milton Hershey School to get what it is that helped me. But I think if we all work together to provide more environments like Milton Hershey School, then more people, right, can catch up and get the support that they need for us to all, on a global scale, vibrate, if you will, at this level of generational actualization. Now we can talk about innovation and we can talk about, technology, and we can, the next Einstein might be right there in Market Street, but maybe she doesn't know it because she's never been exposed to quantum physics or something, right? Like, that's really the drive behind it. I like to create environments where we can have conscious conversations and solve some of humanity's biggest problems. But in order to do that, we have to take care of basic needs.
This is so interesting because it is rare on this podcast to meet someone who actually made use of their education. Right, Don? I mean, it's people get into things from all sorts of different angles, but the way that you did it was by listening to what you heard around you and saw and learned around you at Hershey, and then extending it at Penn State, and now you talked about it, boots on the ground work. I mean, you're this orchestrator of just so many different sciences and modes of thought. It's quite wonderful.
I enjoy it. It's fun. I'm a nerd trapped in an athlete's body. So I'm with it.
Let's talk about that athlete for a little bit. You went to Penn State to play football, and it didn't quite go the way you thought it would, but I think possibly the problems that you ran into at Penn State are a couple of the things that got you rolling when you started the bridge, overcoming difficulties. What were some of the problems you ran into at Penn State?
Yeah, well, I went to Penn State fully expecting to go to the NFL. So, whatever that path was, it worked and I made it. But with that said, it wasn't the anticipated route, no doubt. And my mantra is perseverance through adversity, right? And my adversity hit rather early at Penn State. My redshirt freshman year, I'd earned a starting spot as a tight end. I was catching passes, blocking people, right, doing some great things, and I was coming into myself as a player at the collegiate level. And then I got injured, right? I blew out my knee, like my entire knee. I tore my ACL, MCL, meniscus, part of my patella. I had 3 bone bruises because of the way my knee had hyperextended. Right. So it was a bad deal. Like pretty much my leg was dangling by like the PCL or something. It was crazy. So it was supposed to just be 2 surgeries, right? One for the patella, for the meniscus, for the MCL. They were going to let that heal up and then do the ACL, which that was going to be a 9-month recovery after that. Now, in between those 2 surgeries, though, I had developed a staph infection in my bone marrow. Right. So now not only was my career on the line, right, but my life was on the line. And all in all, I ended up being out of football for over 2 years. And I ended up having 5 different surgeries because the infection kept coming back. There were times where I had to inject myself with my medication through a PICC line. They had me on every pain medication you could think of because none of them were working, to the point where they prescribed me this medicine called Dilaudid, which, as the nurse explained to me, could be more commonly known as heroin.
Pretty much, yeah.
Gave me a bunch of pills of it, and that was the only thing that could really help me sleep, right? Because I wasn't able to sleep because how much pain that my body was in. So ends up taking these pills, and as my body starts to get attached to them, the only way I can sleep, my mental health, starts getting really depleted. And this was around the time where I wanted to quit, playing football, because to me, it had taken everything away from me. It took football away from me. It felt like I was no longer going to class. I was just going on exam days, and I was leaning into what people say and C's get degrees, as opposed to what I always said, which was A's get you paid, right? So I was okay with getting a C, right? My spiritual health was depleted. My mental health was depleted. I wasn't contributing anything to my community. And again, that was the whole man concept, and I was not being a whole man. So I wanted to quit. And I remember calling back to Milton Hershey School because they actually offer you a scholarship. So I called back to Mrs. Ainsworth, and she, let me cry it out. And just got me straight. Like, hey, look, what you're going through is bigger than you. Get through it. Focus, like I said, focus on what you can control and move forward, right? And it was tough at Penn State, injury-wise, because once I came beyond the injury, once I came back was also when my coach was fired. Right, I was at Penn State when everything went down with Jerry Sandusky. Well, he wasn't there, but everything came out.
That whole nightmare, right? Yeah.
All that, right. So I was there with Joe Pa's last team meeting, his last win, his last loss, all that. And so being there during that time was tumultuous, to say the least. And I was actually the very first player to come out publicly before the sanctions were put down on Penn State to say, hey, look, no matter what happens, whether we have a football program or we don't, whether we can play football here or not, I'm staying here at Penn State. Right? I committed to this university for far beyond what athletics, is about here. And that was what Joe really called the grand experiment. Right. And it was really the embodiment of it, that we're beyond just these athletes that are going to come play good football. We're going to finish our degrees. And that's how I looked at it. And, by doing that, I gained a bunch of fans and interest in my career and who I was. So that, to this day, a lot of those relationships are very strong because of my stand, I guess, to commit to that university. But then to continue the adversity, I did end up earning my starting spot back after, being injured and being out for 2 years. And I got that back for a year. And then my very last year in college, I actually switched positions from tight end to tackle, which is not an easy switch and certainly not one you should make your very last year of college. If you're trying to make it to the NFL. But I did, and I ended up earning a starting spot there and kind of split time my senior year. I guess I should call it my I actually had 2 years left to play if I wanted to because of how bad my injury was. But I had finished my degrees. So I had a choice of if I wanted to go into an MBA program and get my master's in business, and that be covered by my football scholarship, or take my shot, at the NFL. And what helped push along that decision was Bill O'Brien, who was our new head coach who had come in. He was only there for 2 years. He had come to me at the end of the season and said that he was going to take an opportunity to go be a head coach in the NFL. I didn't want to go through another coaching switch. I had finished my degrees. I figured, hey, if the NFL is going to work out, it's going to work out. And if it's not, then I'll do what I got to do in the business world. So I took my shot at the NFL and did not get drafted. The other teams, they were very interested because of how big I was and the numbers I'd put up athletically, but I just didn't have much experience as an offensive tackle, and they didn't really want to pay for the learning curve. So I had an opportunity to go and try out for a few different teams, and that's what I did.
And you landed with the Seattle Seahawks, and you went to the Super Bowl, but you lost that Super Bowl.
Well, here, let's explain.
Well, you didn't lose the Super Bowl, but
and before we get to just losing you got to get to the dance to be able to dance first.
Right, and you had a big role in one of those games to get to the dance, right?
That's right. So we won the Super Bowl the year before, and we're trying to get back to the Super Bowl. That's always the thing, right? Can you do a repeat? So we're in the NFC Championship game. And it's Seattle Seahawks, 2014 NFC Championship game. Seahawks versus the Green Bay Packers are playing Aaron Rodgers. And it's late in the third quarter and we're down 16-0. Not really where you want to be versus Aaron Rodgers. And my role on the team, right, because I was still learning to be an offensive tackle, and I was so far down the depth chart that it qualified me to play tight end. So that's what I was doing, and I was going in motion and running routes and running little fake routes and whatever I was doing. But it allowed me to kind of adjust to the NFL. But that came in handy, when we got into this game, the NFC Championship game. And normally my plays were, going into the end zone. So once we crossed the 50-yard line, I was always very alert for field goal or for short yardage, big tight end goes in, or, with my plays that were in were on that side of the field. So I'm alert and I'm ready because I think field goal is coming up, right? It's third down. And coach looks at me and goes, Gil, are you ready? And I was like, yeah, I'm ready, for field goal. He's like, no, Charlie Brown. Right. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So Charlie Brown was actually a fake field goal that I could catch a touchdown. And we were calling it in the NFC Championship game to a rookie who, to make matters worse, just dropped the pass the day before in practice.
Oh, no.
So I'm definitely not thinking that they're going to throw it to me. Right. So he calls it and we go out. The defense is lined up perfectly, for it to work out. And it's a run pass option. So John Ryan, the holder, it's called Charlie Brown because he's like Lucy. Right? He pulls the ball up when Hauschka goes to kick it and then rolls out, and he can run it or he can pass it depending on how the defense plays. And they played it where a better option was to throw it to me. So he tossed it up to me and I caught the touchdown, and that ended up, again, we're down 16-7. Like, it's still not cool you scored a touchdown, but like doesn't matter if you don't win. So that ended up being the catalyst for what is considered one of the greatest comebacks in NFL playoff history, not because of how much of a deficit we overcame. That's certainly important, but the way we did it, right? This fake field goal to an offensive tackle. Then we had a 2-point conversion. We had a few different third and fourth and long conversions. We had an onside kick recovery when literally everybody and their mom knew we were kicking an onside kick, and we still got it. All that just to get into overtime, to then on a zero blitz, third down, Russell checks it to an all go, to chuck it up to Jermaine Kearse, right, who's got a defender draped on him like a backpack. And then a little side note story as part of the game, Russell has targeted Jermaine 4 times in the game, and Jermaine has dropped the pass all 4 times, and it's intercepted each of those 4 times, right? But Russ, true and through, comes right back to Jermaine during this most crucial play, chucks it up to no other than Jermaine, who's got this guy draped on him, catches it in the end zone, touchdown, Seahawks going back to the Super Bowl.
Wow.
So as you stated, so excitedly, we did go back and lose, but it was the one where we lost to Tom Brady and the Patriots. So, I'm not, too hurt by it. And that was also the one where, coach decided not to hand the ball off to Marshawn Lynch on the 1-yard line. And I knew it first and foremost because it's a goal line play, so I should be in. And we were in our it just, yeah, you know how it ended. We didn't win, but it was the game before was phenomenal.
Yeah. So let me ask you then, Garry, as you're continuing to work on the McDevitt building in Harrisburg, what are your plans to expand the bridge? Do you have other cities that you're already working with, or do you have other cities that are in your target zone that you want to work with? How is this going to go forward?
Yeah, well, I'll first say this, that we are not working on the McDevitt building because they built a new school. We are working on the bridge in Harrisburg.
My bad. My bad.
No, I don't. I'm just doing it out for everyone. In terms of expansion, we're in a nice place because we've actually had a handful of municipalities, developers, investors who actually have identified our model and they want it to be in their towns. So we're actually working on a few locations. I'll only mention a couple of them just because how real estate goes. But we do we have an MOU in Pittsburgh. I won't say where we're looking at in Pittsburgh or what have you, but Pittsburgh is one. Williamsport is another. Erie, and then also Philadelphia. So I'll just keep it to the Pennsylvania locations for the time being. But we do have a few other across the nation that we're working on right now with, like I said, a few different municipalities, developers, owners of properties, and investors. And then we've also got our hands out across the pond. Right. So we've got some interest up in London, in India, and then down in Africa, we got one in Nigeria and two in Zambia that we're in the process and pre-development of. So the bridge model is certainly doing what we intended it to do, which is create legacy.
That is just so interesting. It's almost like a franchise, right? And in the best of ways that you're seeding a very good idea and getting it to take root around the world. I love it.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for talking to us today, Garry. It sounds like a wonderful plan, and it sounds like it's something that will really make a difference in the communities where you're working. So good luck, and keep us posted on how you're doing.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. If there's any questions, please let me know. You can learn more at thebridge.com. Very simple website, thebridge.com. And that'll take you to everything you need to know. Contact us, volunteer, you donate through our nonprofit, whatever's clever. Reach out, get involved, bring us to your town, all those things.
This has been wonderful. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Check out our website at musicalinnertube.com, where you'll find all our episodes, profiles of our guests, and lots of extras. You'll even be able to leave us a voicemail.
Our email address is musicalinnertube@gmail.com. And on Twitter, our handle is MInnertube. Capitalize the M and the I.
The Innertube is available on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, and iHeartRadio podcasts. Like us and give us a good review on any of those platforms.
And as always, thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for our theme music.